first son, Willie, was the only boy born to Rosalina and Augusto, and he died when he was only 22 years old. So he lies here with his mother in this grave. But anybody, Jim, I think you should say something about these people when we go to a place.
Why are they not together?
You think
Good question.
Grandpa Dias' nickname was Usantinho, which means the little saint, because he wasn't.
Okay.
Portuguese nicknames can be really accurate. I'm not sure why they're not buried together. I know that Willie was very close to his mom, and that explains why they're buried here together. Why Augusto and Rosalina are not buried together, and why Augusto's gravestone faces the wrong way, we all have to draw our own conclusions. I really don't know. Rosalina came to Hawaii in 1879 with Augusto with 4 children, including a 6-month-old infant. She was, I think, a very brave woman. She was, like most of the Portuguese who came to Hawaii at that time, illiterate. She couldn't read or write her own name. She and Grandpa weren't married when they came to the islands. She was from Funchal as well, yes. They're both from Madeira. And they didn't get married until 1886, 7 years after they arrived, and a couple children later.
Oh, that boy,
Poor Georgina, I think, was born.
Well, like I say, Usantinho, yeah, that's the way he rolled.
That's a boy.
Interesting.
So we don't know much about Willie except...
Well, Willie was one of the reasons why the Nunes family were so successful as ukulele makers is the Nunes sons went into the business. Augusto had a son who, as far as I can tell, demonstrated no interest in making ukulele or guitars or anything else. He was a barber, and he died an alcoholic. That's what's listed on the death certificate, and I think that was a crushing blow to Grandma Dias, to Grandma Rosalina, because he was the only boy, and in those days, that being a boy meant a lot. Yeah.
That's what you have.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
You move on?
Back down the end and to the left.
Yes.
Patricia.
Hi, Patricia. Baines, Jordan. I know you read all the names.
Yeah. I've heard that name. Sister, Carol.
Carol,
Oh, nice to meet you.
So nice to
Finally
meet
putting
you
a
too.
face
So
to the
it's
name.
on Carolina's side, and this is my son here.
Hi, Bill. I'm Kenny. Nice to meet you.
Are the photographers supposed to hang back?
I don't know. I'm sure how it works.
Hi, Carol. Hello. How you doing? Yeah. No. Wow, it depends which tall guy. The other tall guy.
Come close, you guys, so they can hear. You can come all inside here. You can walk between. There's curbstone. But yes, you do want to hold on to your son-in-law, your grandson.
Yeah. Where is it?
This is the Suarez.
Whoa.
So again, I'm going to have Jim be as our historian because we barely got together with the Dye side of the family growing up, much less all the siblings of Georgina. So please talk about the man.
Reverend Suarez was the founding minister of the Portuguese Evangelical Church. He's from the Azores, but we won't hold that against him. He married a lot of the people in our family. And Auntie Olga, the oldest child of Felge and Carolina Dias Tranquada, married one of Reverend Suarez's sons, which is why we have a new marker here today to mark that. Auntie Olga was a musician. She played the organ in the church for years. Like all the Tranquada women, she was very long-lived. I wish I could say that about the men. My father's given them a run for their money. Yeah. But the Tranquada women all lived to be in their 90s or even to 100. Wow. So they were tough.
Okay, you know any about these people too?
I don't. This is Rachel is Reverend Suarez's first wife, and but I'm less familiar with the Suarez family.
So mainly it's Olga, but Reverend also, who for 27 years I think he was pastor of the Portuguese church. And Central Union, Central Union Church did this as a mission project. They saw all these Portuguese waifs downtown, and they said, well, and someone said, you can't do this, they're mostly Catholic. They said, you know, you just got to start. So they did this mission, and they joined this, they were the first families, the first contract laborers that came with their families. Everybody else had come by themselves, single men from China, Japan, Okinawa, but the Portuguese wanted to come as family units. So there was a mission for all these poor Portuguese kids running around. And Reverend Suarez, they actually went to Chicago to get him? I think it was Illinois somewhere, where he'd gone to seminary and was a Portuguese pastor, thought he'd be good out here. They brought two out here and he stayed the whole time. So anyway, it was a very intentional mission. And when a few of us went to the 75th anniversary of the merging of the Portuguese Evangelical Church with Central Union, they called themselves a pilgrim church for many years, which is why I never knew why, first of all, why Grandma and Uncle Earl, or the services, were at Central Union, and I realized later why they were Protestant, and especially when you know Augusto's story. There's a reason why the Catholic Church, he wasn't seen too highly in the eyes of the Catholic Church.
Although he and Grandma were married in the cathedral.
They were. Oh, downtown.
Yeah, downtown, yeah.
The lady, are they?
Yeah.
All right.
Isn't that another gravestone behind you?
It's the first way.
You gotta include her too. Do a blessing.
Should we go down to the Tranquada grave, which is right below Augusto's? This is the nicest one. They can make them see flowers. Alrighty, Jen, you have one here, and any Tranquada wants to speak.
Yeah, well,
We got a lot of Tranquadas here.
Fels Tranquada married Carolina Dias.
Which number sister is she?
She is the number 2 daughter
Second.
after Christina. Felge arrived in Hawaii in an unorthodox manner. He stowed away on a boat when he was 16. I think as much to avoid mandatory military service as anything else, but he was from a large family. He was, I think, number 7 or number 8 or something like that. So I think he just decided, he already had some cousins, some De Silva cousins in Hawaii. So he decided to take a shot. He was smuggled aboard the ship, came over on the Thomas Bell. He worked in a bakery at Horn's Bakery downtown. He worked as a janitor at the YMCA. And then he worked for the Customs Service for the rest of his career. Carolina, before she married, was a milliner at Saks in downtown, the dry goods store. She designed hats, apparently was quite in demand for her design skills. And they lived on Matlock Avenue, just right by the freeway. The house is gone, but the address is still there. And Aldine, Baines Jordan needs to talk about.
Aldine was our grandma, and we called her Nana. And she was pretty strict when we were kids. We didn't like that, but as we got to know her, we came to realize she's a real angel. She was the sweetest lady. We'd go and have dinners. That was her big thing, was going to Manoa Valley where she lived, and we'd go have our Thanksgiving and Christmas and Easter, and I think 4 big dinners every year. Every year she'd have that. We'd all us kids would go there and meet there, and then we'd meet her. That's the only time we got to play with our cousins, who's LD Cabral. I don't know if he made it.
No, he might come shortly. He's
okay. We called him Laurie in those days. And but that's how I remember. She was just an angel.
She was the kindest woman. I never heard a complaint, never a bad word against anyone her entire life. I've never met anyone so sweet and loving and kind.
Then she went to Arcadia and lived out her years there, and she'd have dinners there, so we'd all meet there, and I'd come from Alaska, and people would just come from all over, and we'd have try to keep our dinners going until she couldn't do that anymore, and then she went to the other section of Arcadia, and I think she lived to be 101, as I recall.
101 and a half.
Yeah.
Almost 102.
And we went to her funeral, and it was really nice. She had a lot of old friends that came.
I met Grandpa Tranquada and Grandma first in 1931. I don't remember that. We were back in 1939 on the Matsonia from California. And I do remember the house that they had on Matlock Avenue. They were wonderful, wonderful folks. And something that Jim didn't mention is that Bell Tranquada had 3 brothers on Madeira. They all departed about the same time for British Guiana. And when British Guiana became independent of Britain, they all moved. 2 of them to Canada and 1 of them to London. And I have had some communication, not recently, with them, but there are Tranquadas in Canada and in Britain. They're the ones that had the story Were you going to tell that story
Which one?
about the name?
Oh, well, Tranquada is not a very Portuguese-sounding name. It's not like Cabral or De Silva or Suarez and there are a lot of family stories about where the name came from. It probably is a nickname, as opposed that we think that the real family name is Rodrigues. But the story that Grandpa told.
Well, I was told that the original family name was Rodrigues, and sometime in the middle of the 19th century, our forebear in Portugal actually owned some land, so that's how distinguished this family is. And he worked the land himself instead of having servants do it, and they gave him this nickname, Tranquada, which means something like tough to pull out of the ground or something like that. And this was the story that we were told. Then 40 years ago or so, I was in medical education. Secretary down the hall came to my secretary and said, here's an article in this medical journal by a woman named Tranquada in Canada. Could that person be related to me? So I wrote to her, and indeed she was one of the Tranquadas that had gone to Canada. And I asked her if they had the same story in their family about the origin of the name Tranquada. And she said yes, they did. Exactly the same story. Then a few months later, a young faculty member in the Department of Pediatrics called me up, and he said, I've been reading the biography of Moses and Maimonides. I don't know how many of you know about Maimonides, but he was a Jew from Spain who was taken to Egypt by the Sultan to take care of the Sultan's child in the 18th century, 12th century. And he writes in this biography of Moses and Maimonides, became a very famous, Jewish, very famous physician in Asia, that he took with him an assistant named Tranquada. And my romantic interpretation of all of this is that the Rodriguez name was adopted when the Inquisition came along, and the Tranquada family that had been apparently Jewish changed to Christian, took the Rodriguez name until the middle of the 19th century when it was safe to come out again. But anyway, that's my kind of romantic interpretation of a lot of vague information.
Well, family stories, my grandfather told me that he was told as a child that Grandma Dias, Grandma Rosalina, had been a lady-in-waiting to the Queen of Portugal before she came to the islands. And I think we can safely say that's not true.
I had heard from Auntie Julie Tranquada that, and I could get it wrong because it was quite some time ago, but I was under the impression Tranquada was referring to the gnarled root of the grapevine going into the ground.
Yep, that's, yep.
And that the family originated there in Porto Santos, which is next to Madeira, the little sand island.
Right,
next
exactly.
to Madeira Island. And so that was what I had remembered, but it goes much deeper, I see. Oh, good to hear it's the same story. Auntie Julie was definitely, well, she was my great auntie, and I think she was the youngest, right? Of how was she related through?
She was a Carrero.
Carrero, that's right. She was through the Carrero side, and she was grandma to my grandma. She was auntie to my grandma, but they were close in age, and I know that it was really funny that she just had this rascal side to her. But one of the last things she ever did, and I did speak with Tommy yesterday.
Oh, you did?
Yes, I did. He gave his apologies and kind of was a little bit like not ready to go out and about, but he is doing okay, and he's retired and living in Kailua in Auntie Julie's house still. And Reynolds. The last thing she said, she grabbed me and she said, keep your family close. Hold your family, touch them, show them physical love. It's so important. I can't tell you. And I think as I've grown to understand our family, I see that it comes from this heritage and this sense of specialness. Yes. Thank you, Lee, and everybody for putting it all together. My name is Ian. Thanks.
Okay, so our kupuna, please take a chair so you can sit.
I see you got a case in.
It's the original case.
Oh, did you have that last time, the case?
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
There's all that.
Uh-oh. And there's a real Dias ukulele.
Oh, I gotta get a screw out of the car.
Oh, no.
So,
I don't think
if
I
you'll
have.
notice, we don't have the granite base that the plaque goes on yet, but I had an idea that perhaps it should be properly shown. That this is what the base will look like. So you have to give credit to my nephew Trent Dye, who made this yesterday. Yeah. And it's the dimensions. You have to imagine 5 inches more will go underground, buried underground. But this will be granite, and it will be recessed 1/2 inch on each side, so the plaque will sit into that recessed space. My friend Janet Gilmar, we're going to give her a small honorarium as a thank you. She designed this, looking at the grave stone and seeing the angle here, and trying to figure out, and some depth here, and it's going to be rough hewn, as this stone is rough hewn, so that it kind of fits the feeling of the original grave. Anyway, I just thought you had to see it. We just couldn't put it on the ground or hold it and say, look, this is it. So thank you very much, Trent, for doing that. And Ian has added an actual Dias ukulele right here.
Oh, wow. No wonder.
Is gracing the grave.
This ukulele was given to my grandmother, but Nana, Jean Thornton. So Jean Milim Thornton, Clifford, Theodore Clifford Milim's daughter. And it was originally made for Charles Gilliland in 1893, I believe. 94, yeah, that's right, 1894. And it was bequeathed to my grandma in the 60s. And she had a light restoration done, which is why the sprinkle is okay. And the original pegs were changed out to plastic at that time, or at sometimes earlier. But that wasn't an original Augusto Dias. Braguinha. So from the mold.
It's the only one left in the family. It's the only Dias ukulele that you will see outside of a museum or a private collection. And it doesn't have a label because it was custom made for Charlie.
But there is papers.
But it is a really beautiful example of Grandpa's best work. This is a deluxe soprano. This is not the cheap version.
Yeah.
And it has the most amazing flamed koa. He clearly set aside some special wood to make a special ukulele for his oldest grandson. This is really a remarkable instrument, and it is wonderful that it is in such good hands. And it is, I think, the only one I know of that's actually playable. So
and that was the goal.
It's very special. This is very, very special.
Thank you. I know Cliff Sr. was really pushing to have it put in Bishop Museum, and I just felt like there's still so much life in it.
Oh, yeah.
And it's for our family. So then, when of course the Honoring Central Union, when we all came together, it's just really exciting. It's been part of everything, all of our family events. So.
My dad had one in my early years. I remember it, and I remember the inside had the label. It was so cool. But I don't know what happened to it. I don't know what we did with it.
My grandfather Ernie Tranquata said he had one when he transferred from UH to Pomona College, and he didn't know what happened to it.
Yeah.
As he said, it was just a ukulele.
Yeah.
Well, maybe Uncle Bob's is at the Bishop Museum.
Oh no.
You don't think so?
No, I don't think so.
No, I know for sure. They have two. One is a 5-string Rajao, and the other one is a really small, it's smaller than usual soprano, and neither of them come from the Dias family.
We will get to see them.